Welcome back to the channel. Today's video I have a banger for you with the Strand Icefall Mantle. Let's get into it. The goal of this build is to never die. Now there's many ways that we can accomplish this, but one of the best ways that I've found to accomplish this is by stacking Woven Mail with the exotic Icefall Mantle. Let's get into the definitive breakdown and gameplay guide for the Strand Titan Icefall Mantle. Icefall Mantle replaces your barricade with a personal overshield. When you activate your barricade, you create a burst around yourself that slows combatants. While you have the overshield, you are slowed and the barricade does not recharge. So let's break this down. Let's look at the actual numbers. Icefall Mantle is going to provide the shield buff for 20 seconds and apply 40 slow stacks to any PvE combatants within 7 meters. The shielded buff is a 100 HP overshield that will give you 62.5% damage resistance. You cannot regain class ability energy while it is active, and taking damage will refresh the timer up to the 20-second duration. This damage resistance is something that can stack with resilience, and it can also stack with Woven Mail. Now it's important to remember how to use this, so let's take a look at a demonstration of how we can use Icefall Mantle. Icefall Mantle is going to be activated instead of your class ability, so we're not going to be popping any barricades ever. When we activate it, you can see I'm at a 20-second timer, but as the ads continuously shoot me, that timer continues to go up. Now the overshield that it provides will go down as you take damage. Manage this cooldown appropriately. If you don't have very much HP on the overshield left, it's better to deactivate. Our first aspect in the build is Into the Fray. Destroying a tangle or casting your super grants Woven Mail to nearby allies. While you have Woven Mail, your melee regeneration rate is increased. This is going to help go into our next aspect as they will synergize together. Now the second aspect in the build is Fleshit Storm. Fleshit Storm is going to allow you to slide and cast your melee attacks into unraveling projectiles repeatedly, up to 3 or 4 times basically, which is going to allow you some flexibility for multiple attacks in the build. Next, let's look at the first Fragment. Fragment 1 is Threat of Mind. Defeating suspended targets will generate class ability energy. Because we cannot passively regenerate any class ability energy when the shielded buff is applied, we have to use Threat of Mind after we leave the shielded buff to be able to give us back some energy. So one of the best ways of getting that class ability energy is looking at the tiers of enemies that we can defeat to get that class ability energy back. Tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all listed here, and it shows the corresponding amounts of class ability energy that we gain. As you can see, we're able to tank attacks that would normally just decimate any other Guardian who is not stacking this much damage resistance. One of the other things that we like to do is use a glaive, something that is often undervalued and underappreciated in endgame activity. Using a glaive is actually going to provide some additional damage resistance. Now, one thing about glaives though is that you do need to be careful because splash damage will just go behind a glaive. Be wary of it because when you are blocking, it will just go around it and it can damage you anyways. But adding a glaive to this arsenal just takes this to a whole nother level of survivability. So one of the guaranteed fragments that we want to lock in on this build is Threat of Warding. Threat of Warding is going to reduce our resilience by 1 tier, 10. Picking up an Orb of Power, though, will grant us Woven Mail. Woven Mail will provide a 60% damage resistance for a duration of 10 seconds. The source of this will be from Orbs of Power. When we pick up these Orbs of Power, that's going to provide us that damage resistance. Destiny 2's damage resistance is calculated multiplicatively, so we can look at 2 times arc resistance, 1 time Woven Mail, 1 time shielded buff from Icefall Mantle, and tier 10 resilience, and calculate that using the formula that I show above. You can see that this comes out to about a 92% damage resistance in PvE activities. Pretty strong right there. Moving on, we're going to talk about our third fragment in the build. That's going to be Threat of Geneartion. Now, Threat of Geneartion is going to lower our discipline by 10. Dealing damage is going to generate grenade energy. We rely on this fragment because we have no aspect to use our barricade for an extra suspend. Without a Bant Leap, this is a must-use fragment to ensure we can synergize with Threat of Mind. Threat of Mind is going to ensure you have 100% uptime on your class ability, damage resistance, and overshield. Threat of Generation is going to ensure that we're always ready to suspend targets. Use your class ability, suspend targets, defeat them, and then gain up to 50% class ability right back. Next is going to be Fragment number 4, which is going to be Thread of Continuity. Suspend, unravel, and sever effects applied to targets have an increased duration. Through just our subclass, our Shackle Grenade, our Fleshit Storm, our Frenzied Blade, we can apply Sever, Unravel, and Suspend. This fragment is going to increase the base duration of each of these debuffs by 50%. So the shackle duration is going to go from a normal duration of 8 seconds. With continuity applied, it's going to go up to 12 seconds. That's going to be a huge benefit when we're talking about suspending high health targets in PvE. Next, we're going to be looking at Sever Duration. Sever Duration is normally 10 seconds. With continuity applied, that goes up to 15 seconds. Sever is going to reduce enemies' outgoing damage in PvE by 33%. So that's very, very useful. Next, I'm going to hit you guys with the full breakdown on the weapon loadouts for this build. The build is centered around Quicksilver Storm. That's going to be the main exotic that we're going to be using because it's going to deal 40% more damage to red bars, and it's going to have a higher chance to generate heavy ammo for us when we're using a heavy ammo finder and just intrinsically in general. So it's also going to be able to generate tangles on the battlefield with part of its catalyst. And then I use for Overload champions, this is a loadout where we're going to be dealing with anti-barrier champions and Overload champions. We're going to use the Path of Least Resistance with Volt Shot and Shoot to Loot. Shoot to Loot is going to be really important because we can pick up the orbs that we see around on the battlefield that we might not be safe to get to, but it's going to reload all of our weapons and also give us that Woven Mail, as well as proc any other armor mods that would proc from picking an orb of power up like Absolution or Recuperation. Then I just have a machine gun because Nanotech Tracer Rockets is on the artifact mod, and this helps provide more ad clear in the loadout because we don't have something like a Forbearance, and that's just going to help round out the build. Now the second build is the same thing because, like I said before, it's all going to focus on Quicksilver Storm as our exotic. But what we're doing is we're swapping out our special weapon. Instead of using a Trace Rifle to stun Overload champions, and say we're dealing with barriers and unstoppables, we're going to equip a Glaive. Now the Glaive is going to be your personal preference, what Glaive you prefer, whether you prefer an Arc Glaive or a Void Glaive, that doesn't really matter. Or the perks so much don't really matter. Maybe something with Demolition would help, or if you have the Trials one with Volt Shot, that would be really cool as well. But right now I would just say pick whatever Glaive that you're comfortable with, or what you like, or what looks the coolest. This is just going to be our loadout for dealing with barriers and unstoppable champions. I'm running Replenishing Aegis off of the Ecliptic Distaff from the Ritual weapon previous seasons ago. Now our third loadout is going to be focused on just having a linear fusion rifle, still using the Glaive here, but having a linear fusion rifle just to do some DPS instead of more ad clear focused things with the machine gun. So those are going to be 3 loadouts that you have to use in your back pocket for this build. Next up, let's take a look at the armor mods. First, let's talk about the armor stat priority focus. You're going to want to focus on resilience and discipline. This build is going to rely heavily on suspending targets and having our class ability off of cooldown. It's okay to have low recovery because we have Woven Mail and the shielded buff. Now, as for our helmet armor mods, we're going to have 1 copy of Harmonic Siphon, 1 copy of Heavy Ammo Finder, and 1 copy of Special Ammo Finder. This is going to ensure that we have ammo to stun the appropriate champions, gain armor charges via Orbs of Power for Woven Mail. Next, let's move on to our arms. On our arms, we're going to have 1 copy of Grenade Kickstart, 1 copy of Impact Induction, and 1 copy of Bolstering Detonation. This is going to give us 20% class ability via grenade damage and 20% grenade energy via melee damage. That's going to help sustain our ability gameplay loop. Next, we're going to move on to the chest. The chest is going to be having 1 copy of Charged Up and 2 anti-surge resistances. By doubling up on the incoming threat element, we can gain 25% resistance from that element. Charged Up ensures we are going to keep our Shackle Grenade free and being available. 4 times armor charge when thrown is going to refund 37.8% of our grenade ability energy. Next, let's talk about our legs. On our legs, 1 copy of Absolution, 1 copy of Recuperation, and 1 copy of Orbs of Restoration. On a single orb pickup, we're going to get 70 HP, Woven Mail, 5% to all of our abilities, and 10% to your least charged ability. Next, let's take a look at the mark mods. On our mark, we're going to have 1 copy of Reaper, 1 copy of Bomber, and 1 copy of Outreach. Now, the interesting thing is that Reaper is able to provide double orbs. Use Icefall Mantle on activation and deactivation to get 2 orbs from Reaper. The next thing that we want to talk about is our artifact mods in the build for Season 21, Season of the Deep. Now, there are still some good artifact mods that are going to support Strand builds this season, even though it seems like it's been dominated by Arc builds. The no-brainer thing here is to make sure that you have anti-barrier auto rifle. Then we're going to make sure that we have overload trace rifle, and we're going to also make sure that we have unstoppable glaive. We're basically just taking everything in that column because we don't really need anything else. We are going to need authorized mods melee because we have an arm mod that relies on this for the build. Next is improved unraveling. It's going to increase the amount of damage dealt by unraveling a target. This is important because we are able to do this quite often. Deeper Origins is going to increase the benefit of the nanotech tracer rockets that Quicksilver Storm shoots. And then we have Strand Soldier. Your Strand weapons will gain unraveling rounds, so that's going to pair with that previous artifact mod that we just looked at. We also have Counter Charge, where we're just going to get a free stack of armor charge when we stun a champion, which is going to be important because that's what this build focuses on, handling end game PvE activities. Then it makes sense to grab Conductive Cosmic Needle. That way any Arc Souls or Void debuff weakened grenades are going to help deal extra damage to anything that's suspended, unraveled, or severed from our build. That's going to help our teammates and synergize well with other members of the fire team. Then we also have squad goals, because if we're playing very aggressive and our teammates are near us as well, when we perform a finisher, they will also gain Woven Mail for 10 seconds, so that's just a no-brainer to take. Appreciate everybody watching this video. I know I haven't made a new video in a while, but I appreciate all my loyal followers. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a wonderful day. Peace. We're really close to 3,000 subscribers. If you could, consider subscribing. It doesn't cost anything, it's free, and it helps me out and it helps the channel grow. Once again though, thank you guys all so much for watching. I appreciate all the support and positive feedback. Thank you guys.